going to open up my chat here. Welcome back. So I went outside on a little break there. It was garbage day, so I brought in the garbage cans, and that shouldn't be the highlight of my day, but my gosh, it is so beautiful outside that might have been the most peaceful garbage can collection I've ever had. It's so nice out there. Oh my. I know people are laughing at me. I guess I've turned into that old guy that's like really comfortable just telling the world what they think. But yeah, you're right. Taking a walk outside especially is always a great thing to do. And thanks, Lindsay. She's the only one that cracked the old man joke. But there is studies. They've done studies that actually show, going for a walk in nature actually does, it reduces blood pressure, and it does all these things for you chemically that just make you in a much better place. So I'm glad it was garbage day, I guess. All right. Yes. So let's finish off our little bit of Kotlin experimenting, and then we'll do something in Android Studio here. So our last little thing here is I'm going to create a little method or function. We're going to call it multiply, and this is something that Java doesn't do well, or doesn't do at all actually. So I'm going to create two variables. One's called left, and it'll be of type int, and one's called right, and it will also be of type int, but I can give it a default value too. I'm going to say equals 10. And I'm just going to return the left number times the right number. So let's take a look at and digest what we're looking at here. So in Java, I'm going to translate a lot of things back to Java for you so that you can appreciate what it's really saying here. So in Java, this would look like public int multiply int left int right. That's what it would look like in Java as a method header. Now the thing is, Java cannot have a default value. So in Java, if I wanted to use this multiply method, I would have to have 2 arguments. There's no way around it. It would complain if I didn't give it 2 arguments. But in Kotlin, it will accept 1. And if it doesn't get the second one, it will just assume that it's set to be 10. I like that. That's a nice little feature. So let's play with this. So if you remember unit testing, when you say assert equals, you give it the value that it expects, and then we can say multiply, and I'm going to say 10 times 5. Okay, so in my little test here, I'm expecting that I'll get 50 if I multiply 10 times 5. And I hit run. And it basically, when it assert equals, it doesn't complain. It doesn't give us a pass or anything. It just gives a little checkbox here. So it worked. And in the group chat, I saw a question that says, what we call it. This here, I would call it a default value. That's what I would call it. I'm not sure if that's the formal name, but that's what I would call it. So let's try something else now. Let's try assert equals, this time with 20, and we'll call our method multiply. But this time, I'm just going to pass in the value of 2. So you'll see it doesn't complain. In Java, this would have complained at this point, right? It would have said it's missing an argument. But here, it said, okay, you passed in a 2. You didn't pass in the variable for the right side, so I'll assume a 10, which means 2 times 10 should be 20. So let's try it. We run it. The test still passes. And the other thing that's kind of interesting about how Kotlin works is you can actually change the order of things around. So in Java, this would error out because this isn't an integer. But here you can actually say, okay, well, the variable that's called right, I want it to be 30, and the one that's called left is 20. The order of the arguments actually doesn't matter if you implicitly use the names. So if we run this, whoop, what's it say? Oh, it's 600. Ah, yes. I guess that would be 600, isn't it? And in the group chat, the question was, that only works if you explicitly call them correct. So let's do something up here. So this time when we run our program, this should print out the value of so we'll print it out so we can actually see what it's doing with these variables. So this is a good question, Eric. All right, let's do this. So here, we passed in left equals 20 on the right side, but it was able to pick up that left is 20. Similarly, when we did it here, right equals 30, it was able to switch them around. Now, if I did Control D there, by the way. That's how I duplicated it so fast. If I take away explicitly calling these variables, you'll see what happens is it assumes now that left is left and right is right. And if we run it, you can see this time it changed them back. So you have to explicitly call the variable name. Oh, Eric, you had to give me the tough questions, eh? So in a 3-argument method, can I have multiple default values? I believe the answer is yes. So let's do another one. Let's call this addition. So left, I don't know, let's call it, yeah, left, right. Okay, so here I've given 2 default values, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all behaves. So let's write another little test here. So let's see. We pass in 3 values. So let's say 1, 2, 3. So that'd be 6. Trying to do my math on I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm trying to do some simple math. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and if we make it plus 20, it'd be 23, right? 23. So there's basically all the combinations, right? So all the variables explicitly added, only 2 of them, so you get 1 default, 2 default values. Let's see, run our little experiment. We look at the results. So when this one ran, it was 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals, oh, interesting how it handled that. It didn't do them as math. It did them as a string. Interesting. Okay. So let's do var result equals so there we go. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. When we just use 1 and 2, and then we get the default value of 20, we get 23. 2 default values is 31. So that looks like it works out okay. So it looks like there isn't really a particular limitation on the number of default values. So excellent question. Keep them coming. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with Kotlin, is really to get you exposed to, it's similar to Java, but it's, the syntax is just that little bit different that it can get you a little turned around. Last year, I had even one of my super strong students was getting a little flustered with it. But then once we started looking at, okay, what does this look like in Java? It was very easy for that person to get their head around what was actually happening. All right, so let's switch gears now. So there's a little bit to do with our syntax. I think we've talked about all of these. Okay, so late init. We used that last week actually when we did view binding. But late init means I'm going to declare my variable, but I'm not able to give it a value yet. So it allows for, if you have, specifically with immutable ones, like an immutable variable, it wants an answer right away. But we even did it with vars last week. Okay, we looked at the Elvis operator. Oh, we haven't looked at this one yet, have we? The exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Not really in detail, but basically, I think we did touch on it up here with one of these, where what it means is you're asserting that something is not null. So here's one that's null. And I think what we did earlier was we said, we put the little exclamation marks in there. We're asserting that it cannot be null. But in this case, it is null, so it would cause a null pointer exception. But there are cases where you had to declare it as something that could be null at one point, and then later, you want to say, no, for sure it's not null. So that's what it's for. All right. You'll see we're going to use this DP a lot. So this has to do with laying out our files, or our activities. as you can imagine, you know, a mobile phone, you know, so I have an iPhone, but like, you know, your mobile phone can be one size format, and then another phone could be wider or taller, or, you know, as the screen pixel densities improve with different products, it can cause some scaling issues with your application. And I don't know how many of you used IntelliJ when 4K screens first came out, because I can't remember. I want to say it was about 4 or 5 years ago, so I don't know if you would have been using it. But we had this problem where students installed the IntelliJ, and IntelliJ hadn't really handled the scenario yet of 4K screens. So because the pixels are very small on 4K screens, you know, the application became like microscopic. You could barely read it. So the same thing is true with our devices. You know, as pixels become smaller and smaller, we need this way of designing that's going to work even though the pixels are smaller. And so the way that they came up with was this idea of a density independent pixel. So it's basically designed that it assumes that a pixel is on a screen that has a resolution of 160 dots per inch, or pixels per inch. That's the ratio. So if your screen had 320 pixels in 1 inch, what it would do is, instead of a pixel being 1 dot, it'll basically use two pixels, right? So it can scale it and still make it usable, like easy to read or whatnot. You can use actual pixels, and you can see here a little note: not recommended. It doesn't scale well. And then you'll see SP, which stands for scale independent pixels, and that's more for font sizes. Okay. So we looked at this a bit last week, storing dimensions and whatnot. The idea with the architecture is all of the strings go into a strings file. And that way, if you need to support multiple languages, you're really just editing one file. It's very quick and easy. What I would like for us to do is, let's go in and modify that file. So if we run our app right now, I hit play. This is a little anticlimactic. Looks like it, So if you've been playing in the test area, what you're running when you hit the play button is your test, not your actual application. So I do this drop down, I gotta choose the app. Now I'm gonna hit play again. Now the Gradle's running, this looks much better. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna allow access. Oh my. Okay, so my program runs. Now, I called today's project F21COMP3025 week 2. And just like a company may decide to build an Android app and, I don't know, give it some fancy internal code name. So the project's called, I don't know, Flashbug or something. But that doesn't mean that we want our users to see that name. So that name is referenced in our manifest file. Is it manifest? Up here, you see it says Android label, and it gives us whatever we called our project. What I want you to do is I want you to go into your strings file and change this to be called lesson number 2. So if we look at the organization of our project at a high level, almost everything we're going to change is either going to be in the Java area. Don't worry, I'm going to go through how to change this one, and you'll be changing some others. So we've got the Java section, which holds our models and our controllers. And we've got our resources section. And the resources are all the things to do with what our application looks and feels like. Okay, these are all the resources, the visual resources. So if we want to change a string value in the manifest, if I hover over this, you can see it actually shows me that this thing is in the string resource called app name. So the development environment is smart enough to say, here's the current value, and it points me to where that actually is stored. So if I go into my resources, under values, you can see in here we have strings. And currently we only have one string in our entire application, and it's called app name. So it's the same string. So all I want you to do is change this to be lesson 2. And let's rerun our app. So now when it loads, you see it grabbed that string, and it says lesson 2. So this is a very easy way to keep all of our words in one spot. Just looking at time, we're doing fine. Okay, so in today's lab, what I wanted to do, or lab demo, it's similar to last week, but rather than just read someone's name, what I wanted to do is put in a username and a password field, and we'll do a little simplistic validation on that password field, very simplistic validation. And instead of using a toast, we're going to use something called the snack bar. And I suspect we'll have a little bit of time left over, so we'll look at how can we change some of the colors in our theme. So what I'd like to do now is I want to get rid of where it says hello world. So in the group chat, you can tell me what directory do I need to look in to find the file where I can affect this. Lindsay, I hope you've had like 9 coffees or something today. Like your fingers are so fast. So she correctly identified that it was in the layout, the resources layout area. And if we click on activity main, this is our layout file. And you may say to yourself, well, hold on, but these don't match because this doesn't have this on it. What's going on? And it's true. This part up here, this banner or header, it is defined by the overarching theme of the application itself. These are living in the space below it. Okay, so they are, I mean, they're both the same app, but when we edit this, we're not touching that piece at the top. Later in the course, I think it's around week, I want to say week 6 or 7, we look at how can we add things to this area. So we add in like some menu items and things like that. So to get rid of this, I can click on it and just hit delete. So we're going to do, it's very similar to what we did last week, but you're going to do a bit of it and I'm going to do a bit of it. So I want you to add in a text, let's see here, a plain text element, and I want you to center it horizontally on the screen. Okay, so you can do that part. I'll show you after, but I want you to look through your palette, grab a plain text element, and center it horizontally. So in the group chat, it says, when I run the app in Studio, it runs last week's project. So take a look up here in the upper part of my screen. Make sure you've got your app open. If it could be that your current application is crashing for some reason, and you're actually just seeing what was on your device for last week. Or it could be that your Gradle's just taking its time to run. So down at the bottom, if it says, Gradle building or anything like that, it could be that it just hasn't launched onto your device yet. So when you've got it centered horizontally, just put in the chat, got it done. Or I'm done. Or I beat Lindsay. Oh wow, look at all these people are ahead of Lindsay. They said it would never happen. Okay, so a few people are done. Wyatt, when you say time to give it a bath, do you mean you're going to restart your editor? Time to give it a bath. I hadn't heard that expression before. My Gradle broke and got all confused. Nope, tossing my. You guys are hilarious. So the group chat is quite funny. Yeah, he's not going to toss the laptop in the water. Although I have been there. I have been there sometimes, and I will say, empathetically, Android Studio is just a beast on your operating system, not your operating system, but your hardware. So if you have a lesser powered computer, it can be a little slow sometimes. So the goal here was to get a plain text element centered horizontally. So all I have to do in my design view is I clicking on text, I grab the plain text widget, I drag it onto the scene and let go. And if I want to center it horizontally, I just have to drag these constraints to both sides. And I look at these constraints as like elastic bands, right? So they're equal strength, they're equal length. So it's going to center it, right? It kind of, the two bands are going to hold it right in the middle. You have, so in the group chat, it says you have an i7, 16 gigs of RAM, and it's just coming to a crawl. I experienced that a bit last year with a similar spec machine. We do have support technicians. It's, give me 1 second here. I'll find the. We have support technicians that can help with that. It's something like support, CS support, or something like that at Computer Study. See if I can find it. I'm going to find it easy on my Windows 11. Yeah, it's a good point too, Mikhail. I did have that problem last year where I'm sure the hard drive was thrashing, trying to find space all the time. Couple ideas for you why you can launch your task manager. So I Control-Alt-Delete, bring up your task manager, and it will spike initially, but then you can see, how much memory do you have available, and then what's the load on your system resources. So the machine I have right now is a similar spec. It's an i7 with 16 gigs. I'm running Android Studio. I'm streaming this, and I'm screencasting it, recording it with a different piece of software. But I'm still sitting only like 30%. So disk space is a good option. All right. So let's continue. Sorry, if you look online, I bet you we can find the student. Oops. I'm just going to see if that link is on our. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 quick second here. Okay, so I added that email to the group chat. So I appreciate if you've done IT support, then you know probably the 99% of the scenarios that are going to slow you down, and maybe it's just as easy as getting a bigger hard drive. You can configure the emulator to use a certain amount of memory as well. So you can configure it to use 2 gigs or 4 gigs or 1 gig. The other thing you can do if you happen to have an Android device is just put your Android device right in so that it will push your programs onto your Android device instead of an emulator. That's one way to at least lighten the load somewhat. Okay, so an Android, like you can find Android devices out there. I haven't personally looked, but from what I understand, I mean, basically you just need a used, beat up machine and just put a fresh operating system on it, and you're good to go. So this is going to complain. We got a little red arrow here, or red exclamation mark. It's complaining because in the constraint view, it needs to be anchored horizontally and vertically. And right now we've only got it anchored horizontally. So I'm just going to connect it to the top. I don't like it right at the top, so I'll bring it down a little. So this is called the top margin. So now I want you to, we're going to create a password field. And to look at the password field, we still have under the text section in our designer, you can see there's password, which would be alphanumeric, or password numeric. So in some cases, you may prefer to just, if password's not super critical, you could reduce the amount of characters that the person can use, and all that they'll see is actually a numeric keyboard. So let's drag that in. And what I want you to do is perfectly line it up with our name field. So the left edges are perfectly aligned. Give that a try. See how it goes. Lindsay is by far the, you're on it today. Okay. So the goal here is to line up the left edges. Okay, so I see Miles is done too. I don't know. Lindsay's taking some good cold brews or something. Yeah, I had my first cold coffee just like a few weeks ago. Super good. Had to redo it. Oh no. Okay. So I'm sure a lot of you said, well, if we're going to line up the left edges, let's center them. Is that what a lot of you did? Okay. So this is a good and logical strategy. But we have a challenge. What happens if these things are different sizes? So let's go into split view for a second here. So up on the upper right, there's code, split, and design. So in code view, all you'll see is your XML. Split view, you'll see your XML, but you can still see how that's laying out on the screen. And of course, design view is what we just had. Now, my edit text here is underlined. Will it show me the error? It's because I don't have a vertical constraint, but let's see what it says. Let's provide some feedback on the warning. Well, it didn't really tell me the issue. Usually by hovering over it, it gives me this, but it's not actually telling me. Oh, there it is. Missing constraints attribute. So it's just telling me I don't have a vertical constraint. So I can do some neat things right here in the XML. So rather than dragging the constraint bubbles around, like by grabbing these and trying to touch here, I can actually do this in code very easily. So I just think, well, I want to attach the top to the bottom of the item above us. And sure enough, you can see the tooltip figured that out. And then it says, well, what do you want attached to the bottom of? So I could be the bottom of the parent, which is my entire activity. I could be the bottom of the person's name. Let's do that. So now it slides it down and they're touching. But maybe I don't want them right tight against each other. Maybe I want a little margin in here. So again, I can start typing. I want a margin. And if I want it above, maybe I'll take margin top. And let's give it a margin of 20 dp. And it slides it down. So you can see that you can edit in this XML just as easily as in the design view. And in many ways, I actually find the XML easier once you know a few of the keywords. And you can see up here, our name, we did this last time. We don't want it to be hard-coded, and we don't want to formally say name. We want to put a hint in here. So I'll replace this to say hint. And we'll say enter name. And because this is, you can see in yellow here, this is a hard-coded name. It wants the string resource. You hold down Alt-Enter, or you can click on this here. If I like Alt-Enter, and it defaults to extract the string resource. That's what it's going to call it. It shows you the file that's going to put it in. We say OK. So now that's in our strings file, right? Enter name. And we started all this to talk about what happens if this is the wrong size. So right now, if I take away this EMS equals 10, that's sort of like a default size. It's going to wrap the content to be as small as it can be around whatever's in it. So right now there's nothing in it. So you can see our password field's very small. The left edges definitely don't line up. So we can start putting in a hint, like enter password. And again, we should add this to our string resources. So Alt-Enter, extract the string resource, hit enter again. So now it looks okay, but these left edges aren't aligned. And what we can do about that is if we click on the Design tab, over here in our component tree, this is basically the same as the hierarchy in Scene Builder. I'm going to hold down Control and select both of these items. And I'll right click. And down here, there's one that says Align. So you see, you can align horizontal centers, which is what we currently have. Or I could do left edges or right edges. I can do whatever I want. So if I hit left edges, you can see my little arrows start to get a little whimsical here, but you can see now they're perfectly lined up, even though they're different sizes. And I'm not pointing this out because I think this looks particularly better. I'm pointing it out because sometimes you may have a lot of fields and you want to just line them up, and this is an easy way to get them all nice and lined up. Okay. This is probably a good spot for a quick break. We've been at it for 40 minutes. I think last time we took about a 15-minute break. Let's take 5, We're going to end early today, I suspect. We're tracking well to end a little early. So let's take let's come back at 2 o'clock. So 8 minutes.